Do you find it difficult to regulate your emotions? Do you experience mood swings or angry outbursts? Do you rely on other people to help you stay calm, or do you need to numb your emotions in order to cope? If this is you, then this video will be useful. I'm going to talk about why some people struggle with emotional regulation, and I'm going to share some ideas for how to start to work on being able to regulate your emotions. Emotional dysregulation is a term used to describe people who struggle to manage their emotional reactions, or to keep their emotions proportional and within the range of typical emotional reactions. Signs of emotional dysregulation include extreme perfectionism, conflict in interpersonal relationships, struggling to calm down, intense emotional responses which don't seem proportionate to the trigger event, impulsive behaviour in response to extreme emotions. For example, someone who loses their temper and responds aggressively to a minor mistake made by another. Or someone who decides that they're unlikable and nobody cares about them when they don't receive a response to a text message. Totally not me. Or someone who feels their emotions so deeply that they turn to food or drugs or alcohol in order to numb them down. There are many reasons why someone might experience difficulty regulating their emotions. Childhood trauma caused by abuse or neglect can lead to attachment disorders which can contribute to emotional dysregulation. There are also some conditions which are associated with emotional dysregulation. These include ADHD, and I made a video specifically about ADHD and emotional dysregulation, which I'll link to in the description box. Autism, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Emotional dysregulation is disruptive and difficult to live with. I know this because I live with it. I have ADHD, autism, and I experienced childhood trauma, so it's not really a surprise that I struggle to regulate my emotions. And it's had some negative impacts on my life. I've had some difficulty navigating relationships and interactions because I can't rely on myself to react appropriately when I'm overwhelmed by a strong emotion. I also find it difficult to trust others because I know that if they behave in a way that's difficult or unexpected, I will most likely have a strong emotional response, and that's difficult to deal with. So sometimes it's easier just to not go there, you know? I struggle to set boundaries or trust my own judgment because I know that my emotional reactions can be disproportionate, so I can never really kind of tell whether the way that I'm handling things is me or them, or it's just a thing. I've also had times when I've experienced really low self-esteem because it's hard to have high self-esteem when you behave in ways that looks difficult, or you have these really dramatic emotional reactions to stuff. It can be hard not to just feel like you're the problem. So lately I've been really focused on emotional regulation and learning ways to regulate. It is not a quick or an easy process, but I thought it would be useful to share with you the things that I am doing on my journey with this, in case it would be helpful for anyone else out there who would like to start a similar journey for themselves. The first step towards gaining some control over your emotions is actually the insight and awareness that you are struggling with emotional dysregulation. For many years, I didn't actually realise that this was an issue. Instead, I was just going from crisis to crisis without really realising that my emotional dysregulation was a big part of the problem. How could I have known that my emotions were dysregulated when this is the way that I've always experienced emotions? Only through learning about neurodivergence, trauma, and associated issues have I become aware that my experience isn't typical. Once you become aware of emotional dysregulation, then you can seek out treatment and strategies. And the good news is you can get better at this. There are medications which can help with dysregulation depending on the underlying cause. For example, I've noticed that my ADHD medication has given me a time to consider how I react to things, where before I just didn't have access to this pause point. It's definitely worth a trip to your doctors if you feel like medication might be helpful, so that you can discuss what might be appropriate for you. I'm currently doing therapy, and I'm working with a therapist who is specialised in working with autistic people and people with ADHD. We're doing trauma therapy and looking at how my trauma impacts my now. But another form of therapy commonly used to help people with emotional dysregulation is DBT. DBT is based on cognitive therapy, but specifically adapted for people who feel their emotions very deeply. DBT can teach you to understand and accept difficult feelings and to learn ways to manage them. If you are considering therapy and you are neurodivergent, I would strongly recommend trying to find a therapist to work with who is experienced in working with neurodivergent people. But considering that accessing therapy is a privilege, I thought it might be useful to share some of the strategies that I'm currently using to manage my emotions. First strategy that I'm using when I'm experiencing an overwhelming emotion is to give myself some space to process and calm down. When I'm overwhelmed, I can end up doing or saying the wrong things. So what I'm doing now is trying to get myself into a low arousal environment where I can be on my own. Typically I use my bedroom for this, but if I'm feeling like I need to move, like sometimes I do when I'm emotionally dysregulated, then I get myself out for a walk in the fields where basically I'm pretty much going to be on my own. Then, once I'm on my own, I take some time to notice where I'm feeling the emotion. Learning how big emotions feel in your body can give you a warning sign to look out for, so that when you are experiencing a little bit of the start of those feelings, you can say to yourself, oh, I think I'm becoming emotionally dysregulated, which just gives you more time to deal with it than when you're like fully swept up in that emotion. I give myself permission to be in that emotion rather than being overwhelmed or frightened by it or trying to fix it. I've also spent some time learning what triggers these reactions. Once you become aware of what triggers you, then that gives you some time to figure out why. For me, anything that feels like rejection tends to trigger me, and as I learn to recognise this reaction and how it feels, then I become more able to use my logical brain rather than my emotions to figure out what's actually happening and how I actually want to respond to this. I'm also able to just avoid triggers when I'm having a bad day or I'm just not feeling strong enough to manage them. I'm learning self-soothing, which is something that I really have struggled with when I get carried away by these big waves of emotion. I'm learning what makes me feel safe and calm. For me, that's doing art or watching silly animal videos or spending time with my dog or playing video games. Finally, self-compassion is really important. Often the guilt and shame I feel at my emotional reaction is worse than the reaction itself. I can recover more quickly if I remind myself that I'm not a perfect person and that I am working on this. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please click the like button and consider subscribing to my channel if you'd like to see more content from me. I'd like to thank the members of my YouTube club, the Purple People, for supporting me as a creator and giving me the capacity to make these videos that I make for everyone. If you'd like to know more about that, then click the join button at the top of my channel. Thanks for watching. Goodbye!